Our usual story about the formulation of the Monroe Doctrine does not usually take into account Spanish Americans or Central Americans playing any role in that. Mexico declared itself independent from Spain in 1821. And then almost immediately, a new Mexican empire formed out of this old Spanish-Mexican colony and annexed Central America. And so in the early 1820s, being annexed by Mexico, folks in San Salvador were very unhappy. And a group of San Salvadoran leaders voted to become part of the United States without the United States' knowledge. There are actually a couple of reasons why they wanted to join the United States. But one of them was that in a republic like the United States, states get to make their own laws. And they also get to be part of making the laws that govern the nation. And so the Salvadorans were really desirous of keeping control over their own laws, as states do, and then also being part of a powerful empire. The US was becoming an empire in that period, and they saw that as an opportunity to not be under the thumb of Guatemala or Mexico or Spain, that they would be equal players in a nation. That's what they really wanted. But they were also seeking US statehood because they were being invaded by two powerful armies. And the US, although not as powerful as Great Britain in this period, was certainly capable of more military might than San Salvador on its own. So in 1823, with invading armies on all sides, a group of San Salvadoran leaders depart what's now El Salvador, and they travel across the isthmus. They land in Boston, and the plan is to travel from Boston to Washington, D.C. to meet with John Quincy Adams, who's the Secretary of State. The Salvadoran commissioners arrived in Washington, D.C. in September of 1823, and while they were gone, well, first, San Salvador was successfully invaded, taken over by the Guatemalan and Mexican armies. And then the Mexican Empire fell. And so those armies retreated, and Guatemala started forming a new republic, exactly what they had wanted from the beginning. And so by the time they got to Washington, they no longer sought statehood for San Salvadorans. Instead, they wanted to start diplomacy on behalf of their new nation. By the time they got to Washington, D.C. in September of 1823, John Quincy Adams had long head up to his family's house in Massachusetts. The men left the documents that they had come all this way to give to the State Department. They left them at the State Department in September. And then Adams returns in October. He reads those documents. And then in November, they formulate the Monroe Doctrine, in part to preserve the right, the power, the possibility of the US annexing foreign parts of the Americas to the United States. Even though the mission didn't actually fulfill its goal of Salvadoran statehood, it did create the cultural pathway to diplomatic recognition for the republic that followed. I think that these commissioners might have swayed Adams's perspective on whether Spanish Americans themselves might have wanted to join the United States. And they depart to go back to Central America, and all of them become major leaders of the new republic. And the leader of the group that came to get their province annexed becomes the first president of the Republic of Central America. John Quincy Adams writes the instructions for the first diplomats from the US sent to the new republic forming in the isthmus. And we have this special relationship with these people because alone among all the Spanish American nations, it's the only nation that sought to become a US state. And that means to him that there's a sort of a common shared set of ideals, which he didn't necessarily believe was true before this point, and also that they were natural kind of allies, and so that relationship should be cultivated.